Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
Yes, it is Meanwhile Here on Earth with me, Peter Robbins, and you are listening on KGRA Digital Broadcasting, kgradb.com. Subscribe to KGRA and use my name as your subscription code, that's PETER, and receive 30% off, whether that's monthly or yearly. You get that full discount. You can also listen to past shows on Spreaker, SPREAKER.com. Well, we have a very special guest today, somebody who I have tremendous respect and admiration for and a lot of affection for, who heads one of the most remarkable chapters in the entire MUFON organization. Stacey Wright is a certified field investigator and STAR team member for MUFON for over the past 15 years, has helped to build the Phoenix MUFON chapter from the ground up to become MUFON's International 2017 Chapter of the Year. I've had the pleasure of speaking for the chapter and look forward to returning at some point in the future. Stacey has worked as team leader on Roswell archaeological digs with Don Schmidt, helped design and produce the Phoenix Lights exhibit for the Arizona Historical Society Museum, acted as MUFON's coordinator for the 2018 and 2019 Field Investigator boot camps, and was team leader for the revision of MUFON's State Director Handbook. Stacey is the organizer of MUFON's annual Field Investigator Boot Camp, which has been held in Mesa, Arizona for the past 4 years. The boot camp is a weekend of concentrated instruction on the protocols of completing a quality investigation of a UFO-related event. And from Phoenix, welcome, Stacey Wright.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. Dare I ask, what's the temperature like in Phoenix right now?
Sunny and beautiful as always. 97 outside right now.
Marvelous.
Yeah.
I wanted to start at the beginning. I'm always curious how people became the figures that they are. And starting at the beginning, where were you born?
Carson City, Nevada. So
any siblings?
Yeah.
You have brothers and sisters?
Say that again?
You have brothers and sisters?
Oh, yes. I have one brother who's just about 2 years older than me. So he pretty much tortured me all my life, but we're really good friends today. So, yeah.
Your parents, is your mom a traditional stay-at-home mom, or did both of your parents work?
Both of my parents worked all their lives. My mom had a series of awesome jobs, from dental office receptionist to assistant principal at the parochial school to deputy sheriff of the county, and all kinds of things in between. So, but mostly administrative kind of things, secretarial stuff. She really liked doing that. So.
And your dad?
My dad was the casino floor manager at Harrah's Tahoe for years and years.
Wow. At what point did you start reading on your own once you'd mastered reading, and what kind of books were you drawn to?
Oh, always the mysteries, something mysterious. I mean, the Nancy Drew mystery books were, the big thing back then. They were about the scariest thing out for kids my age, and then as far as TV shows, I think the scariest thing out back then was maybe Johnny Quest. That was pretty scary stuff. And that was my favorite show. Maybe Scooby-Doo, because along the line of all those mysteries. And so I think, from the time I started being able to pick my own books, it was definitely Stephen King. I think I've read all the Stephen King books that there are, and then of course all the Dean Koontz books and that kind of stuff. And just the good stuff that I can read it really easily and not be scared. But if I see it on the screen, it's a different story. It's a little bit, it sticks. The visual sticks.
I love the fact that you started with Nancy Drew. I mean, you've been dealing with mysteries your whole professional life.
Yeah, basically. I hadn't thought about it until you asked me that question.
And Stephen King, for me, I came to him a bit late. I'm kind of a reading snob. And, when his first novel came out, Christine, I passed it by. He was a horror writer as far as I was concerned. But I began to hear more and more about his work and how enjoyable it was, and became a fan soon after. Dean Koontz also is a remarkable writer. And it's funny, just this week, in looking around at a used bookstore in town to find some reading for my upcoming trip to London, which will be past when this is broadcast next May, I came upon a novel of his I had not seen before, called Saucer. Are you familiar with it?
I'm not.
Well,
the
blurb is just archaeologist digging in, the middle of the desert, finds this shiny piece of metal and keeps clearing it away. And it's been there for a very, very long time. And knowing Dean Koontz, I have a feeling it's not goodness and light that awaits them when they tackle this mystery.
I'll have to jot that down right now, because that sounds like something I need to look into.
Saucer. The other thing about Stephen King, he is an extraordinarily decent person. I mean, he is a role model for all of us, and certainly for writers. Once he really made it big, he didn't buy a big mansion or anything. He started investing in his part of the state of Maine and helping people and encouraging writing and encouraging reading. He is one of my true heroes. Did you read 11/22/63?
Yes. I think I learned more about that whole event by reading that book than I knew previous to that.
Yeah.
And a lot of his stuff is a work of fiction based on fact. So
that's right.
It was pretty good. I really liked it. And you can really connect a lot of dots the way that he did too. So
he
good stuff.
Has such a remarkable imagination and is able to infuse, in this case, reality with it. If that series of numbers doesn't ring a bell for folks, it's the day that John Kennedy was murdered. And we get back in the time machine, so to say, with Stephen King, and look at the what ifs of what might have happened, and our lead character. Just brilliant stuff. You mentioned some television shows. Any other shows that really stuck with you from childhood?
We watched all those basic things. I was always an animal lover, so Lassie was a big one. Wild Kingdom, Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, that kind of stuff. I liked those kind of shows, but I was really into horses too as a girl. Well, I still kind of am, but before I had my first one, I was really into horses. So anything that looked or sounded or smelled like a horse, I was into that.
Great.
Yeah.
The legendary Twilight Zone, was that something that entered into your childhood, as it does for a lot of folks in the world?
I remember that in black and white. Absolutely. Yeah.
Still brilliant.
Yeah. I remember that. And of course, the Jetsons, Star Trek. I always loved those kind of shows. So I had some kind of, a bit of a keen interest in some of that spacey stuff even back then. So.
In terms of movies, and I'm a movie maniac, and I always ask this question of guests, your introduction to the world of movies, was it watching films on TV with your family, or was it going out to, a theater or drive-in, or later in life, doing it with your friends? How did that begin for you?
A little bit of both. Where I grew up in Carson City, Nevada, it was a pretty small town back then, even though it was the state capital, but it probably only had 15,000 people when I was a kid. Wow. So we had one movie theater in town, and I thought we had all the, current movies. We probably did. But I think the first show I ever saw was with my mom, and it was The Sound of Music.
Oh,
And then I think the first show I ever saw, maybe without a parent along with me, was, I think it was Clint Eastwood in Paint Your Wagon. Remember that? I think that was the first show I ever saw on my own.
when you were, in middle school or late elementary school or early high school, did you have a picture of what you wanted to become in the adult world?
Always a race car driver. Always. I just wanted to be a race car
Silly
driver.
me, of course.
Something on dirt. So probably along the lines of the Baja, cool sand rail, something like that. But yes, a race car driver, always. Yeah.
There is a legendary race car driving school in the Southwest. I'm trying to remember whether
it's called
Bondurant.
The Bondurant School of High Performance Driving.
There you go.
Yeah.
I spent 4 or 5 days there. My oldest best friend had this race car driving thing too, and he decided he wanted to study there. And I came along to photographically document it. And it was like being airdropped into Neptune. It was another world for me. And I would get up at dawn to photograph these race cars, lined up 20 in a row with the dew on them and the sun just coming up. For me, it was magic as far as, photographic composition. For the rest of these people, it was about learning how to drive fast, very fast, and very safely.
Mm-hmm.
A race car driver, perfectly. Do you tend to drive fast? You do have some open roads there.
Yeah, I do drive fast. It just seems natural, Yeah.
As a kid, when was it, if it happened in childhood, that the subject of unidentified flying objects captured your imagination or you first became aware of them?
I'm not sure if I ever had that scary, oh my God, a UFO moment. Because like I said, I kind of grew up watching Star Trek, and I always had that prime directive thing in my head, or the idea that there was other worlds out there and we can't possibly be the only one. That would just be ludicrous. So I always had that in my head, and I never really thought about the scary side of an alien or anything like that. The unknown can be very scary in a lot of ways, but it never really hit me as that. And I just like the science part of it mostly. I mean, my favorite thing as a kid was to sleep outside in the backyard, on a summer night in a sleeping bag and just be able to look up at the sky at all the stars and just kind of fall asleep while looking at the stars. That was always one of my favorite things to do.
Beautiful. But there came a certain time when this subject really captured your interest. Was it a book? Was it something, somebody told you? Was it watching a documentary? Was it, what was it that engaged you first about the subject?
I think the first thing that caught my mind was the research on Bigfoot. So I was very, interested in that. And when you read some Bigfoot books and, it kind of delves off into some other arenas, which go into the paranormal or into the UFO thing. So I had met Jim Mann, who started Phoenix MUFON with me back in 2007. And so I asked him a couple of questions about things. And he's like, oh man, do I have some books for you to read? So I think the first book that I read was by Jim Mars, and it was The Alien Agenda.
Yes.
So reading that really opened my eyes, and along with my eyes, it seemed to like flip a light switch on, where I just didn't have enough hours in the day to do enough reading and enough research and looking into this subject. I was just on fire for it. So I still kind of find, not enough time to do the things that I want to do as far as reading about it. But I think that was probably the first book that really got me. And then after that, I came across Graham Hancock, Fingerprints of the Gods.
Oh my gosh, what an amazing researcher and writer.
Kind of blew my head off my shoulders a little bit. Because I love the archaeology part of everything.
Yes.
I'm really interested in that. I think that's fascinating stuff. So, reading about some of this stuff that Graham Hancock was reporting, and that book became basically my Bible at that point. I had it highlighted and marked up in the margins and pages flagged. And, you know, it was just crazy. I went right through that book and looked up everything to verify things. And yeah, it was my Bible for a while.
My gosh, you really started at the top of the heap as far as I'm concerned. So many people in the work, and it's not a bad thing. It's just part of the nature of how some of us are, become completely tunnel visioned on UFOs per se, where Hancock, he's not just a great researcher and investigator, he is a true antiquarian scholar. And he also happens to be a brilliant writer who makes, time and history come alive and be a really extraordinary living thing. I was very thankful when I discovered him. And I remember when Alien Agenda came out, I was in Denver at the time, I think, giving a talk. And one of the best bookstores in the country, I hope it's still there, is the Tattered Cover. And they had a huge UFO section. I'm going along. And all of a sudden, Jim Marrs, the man who wrote Crossfire, one of the first real breakthroughs books on the Kennedy assassination, which I was a huge fan of his as an investigative writer. And ego being what it is, the first thing I did when I pulled the book off the shelf was go to the index and see if there was any mention of me or my books.
Yeah.
And he was very gracious. And we met some years later and were good friends until he passed. A bigger than life character and my favorite kind of Texan, truly a remarkable guy. And working with Jim as, your kind of introduction to this, not Jim Marrs, but
Jim
Man. What a good guy to enter the field with as well.
Yeah, he'd been studying it for quite a while before I did. So he gave me, a few clues on things. And then, we just started Phoenix MUFON and it just kind of blew out of the water. It was great.
When was it that you first heard about this organization called the Mutual UFO Network?
Well, the more I looked into this stuff, I said, there's got to be a UFO meeting. I want to go to a UFO meeting. I want to see all those weirdos. I want to see people in tinfoil hats. I just want to see this, And I thought, surely Phoenix, this world-class city here, and had the history of the Phoenix Lights, surely there's a UFO meeting here somewhere that we can go to. So I started looking into it, and I came across this crazy named organization called MUFON. And so I noticed that they really had lain dormant for about 8 years and there was no meetings in the Phoenix area. So I wrote to, someone in the MUFON organization to ask questions, not knowing that I was actually writing to the executive director of MUFON. And I said, what's up with no meetings in the Phoenix area? And so I got something back like a couple days later and said, that's a really good question. And we're going to look into that and try to get something going for you. So then about 2 weeks later, I got another email. And it was James Carrion at the time that was the executive director. And he said, we got a meeting for you. Not sure how many people are going to be there, but it's going to be at this place at this time. Please go. So we did. And, they were not the organizers of Phoenix MUFON, but it was a state or the assistant state director for Arizona. And she was putting on a meeting to see what kind of interest there was and find some people who might want to become the leaders of a local group. And, there was only about maybe 6 people at this meeting. And as I'm looking around the room and thinking, I could do this.
Yes, you could.
I know nothing about public speaking. I know nothing about putting a meeting together, but I thought I can do this. So I just raised my hand, and that was it.
The rest is history.
And I said, raise your hand, so we had to become field investigators first. And then we started meetings maybe a month after that.
Were you surprised at that first meeting and meetings after that these weren't a bunch of weirdos with tinfoil hats, but regular folks from all walks of life, many of them, with higher educational degrees, other ones, working people who didn't go to college, but a real mix of folks who took the subject seriously and did not register as outsiders or cultists or, strange kind of people.
Right. Yeah. I was very surprised that it was so normal. I wanted something a little more fantastic because I'm entertained by that. But yeah, the people that come to the MUFON meetings are very well read. They're educated.
Yes.
No one's a nut. No one is wearing a tinfoil hat. You know, it's a bunch of just great people from all walks of life, but a lot of professionals. And in our group, we seem to attract law enforcement for some
Yes.
reason. On a good note. So yeah, I think right now we have 7 of our field investigators that are law enforcement. And that's really something I'm proud of, because these people really know what they're doing. They're professionals, they do it right, they're serious,
Yeah.
and they don't make too many mistakes, you know, so it's kind of fun.
It is a quiet revelation I've found over the years as you get to know some of these people as individuals and learn how they came to the subject. Sometimes it's just intellectual curiosity. Sometimes it's sort of organic, an interest in, mysterious stuff like Bigfoot and, archaeology dovetailing into how did they build that? Uh, do you remember when you first heard an account from somebody who was an experiencer or an abductee, and how that registered with you?
Yeah, I thought they were nuts. I mean, because I'd never heard
Yep,
such stories like that. I mean, this is really far out there for someone who is not part of it.
that's right.
There's some amazing stories out there. And then as you sit and listen to these people one on one, you realize that this is something that just rocked their world. I mean, this is something that they weren't asking for, they weren't expecting it. It happened just out of the blue. And you see the sincerity in their eyes and hear it in their voice, and you become friends with these people, and they know that you're listening, that you're an active listener, and they respect that and they need that. And so you realize that these people are just, this could happen to anyone. They never asked for it. And, you know, it really creates something in you to give back that maybe you didn't know you already had.
I
So it's
agree.
kind of a revelation on a lot of ways.
Yeah. Um, it it's like going from one room to another, or in some cases, for some people, feeling like you are being put in a bag and dragged kicking and screaming from one room to another. For me, there's a mantra that I tell myself for debunkers. And let's clarify that a debunker and a skeptic are very different animals. You and I and professionals in the work, we have to be skeptical.
Mhm.
Um, Part of our challenge is after a certain amount of analysis, evidence, investigation, firsthand accounts, physical evidence, you know that you are dealing with a real phenomenon. And so there is that natural tendency to believe. And belief can be a very double edged sword. We have to remember to go back to the baseline each time in investigating. I know for me, it happened literally in minutes when my sister Helen told me about conscious memories of childhood abduction that she had had at a time when there was really nothing out there, unless you were into the subject and knew about the Hill case and, maybe one or two other things. I think also you become, I'll say, a better person in that you become more compassionate, um, more open minded, not to the point of being gullible, but being a good listener is worth more than like a university degree as far as we're talking about here.
It
It
is.
means the world to be taken seriously for somebody who is struggling with the most overwhelming experience of their life in some cases. I know you know that interface. Um, I think also some of us, as we go into this work, we realize I'm better in the field than I am one to one with people under stress, or I'm better, doing research in a library or an archive or, uh, a library than I am, doing investigation with live people, so to say. When you, well, how can I put it? When people come to the group and, they're attending meetings and they want to get more involved, is it a natural thing for you to suggest that they study to become a MUFON investigator?
Yes, that's the first thing I tell them because it's so important and we're so busy in Arizona that I really need more field investigators.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Well, I'm not sure I'm cut out for that. I don't know if I'm good at that." And I'm like, "I'll teach you. We'll show you how." We have a great chief investigator in the state, Dennis Frermuth, he's not a drill sergeant, but he drills you. And, you're just a highly trained individual by the time you're part of our team. And everyone helps everyone along. So yeah, when someone comes up and says, I'm really interested in this and how can I help you guys out? What can I do for MUFON?
Yeah.
We have kind of a core group, that are the really big helpers that we rely on a lot. But when someone new comes in, I say, yeah, I'll have you help me at the front table at the next meeting, or you can help me do something for our big annual camp out that we have, or something like that. And if you're interested, let me tell you all about the field investigation process, and so then they're interested in that. And we get some great people on our team that never knew they would be so great.
Yeah. Statistically, of course, as we know, Arizona has a very high incidence of confirmed sightings, experiencers, landing situations to be researched. Probably, certainly for the average layperson who has just a basic appreciation of the subject, far and away the best known individual in terms of casework is our friend Travis Walton. Do you remember the first time you heard about Travis's experience or were introduced to his book, or his case was brought to your attention?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly where I was at the time, but I remember thinking, wow, he got abducted and he came back and he can tell the tale. That's really cool. He has recall of everything because a lot of times people don't unless they undergo hypnosis.
Exactly.
But Travis had, recall of all this, and he lived right here in the state. He's only 2 hours away, so I know the first time that I met him, I was absolutely starstruck. And we had him come and speak to a Phoenix MUFON meeting, probably 2008 or 9, something like that. And, came to find out this is just one of those salt of the earth people.
Yes.
He's so genuine and he's reserved and he's very quiet and he's just truthful. I mean, you can sit and listen to this man and you just know beyond a shadow of a doubt that what he's saying is the truth. And he didn't ask for this. And if he had it all to do over again, he would not. But it did happen, and he has really good recall and a really fine understanding of it today. It took a lot of years for him to really have that understanding.
Yeah.
And his story is a little bit different maybe than what people think it is.
Yeah.
He wasn't really abducted. Something happened to him under this craft that he was hit by a jolt of pure energy.
Yes.
And I think he was killed. And then he was taken aboard this craft. And he will tell you to this day, it was an ambulance call.
Yeah.
So he was taken aboard and he was healed and maybe even enhanced a little bit because he's a pretty healthy, spry guy. He really is. He does some amazing stuff. He runs marathons and he's just, really good.
Yeah.
But that was an ambulance call for him. And so when people realize that, that here's a guy talking about this, not his claim to fame. Yeah, I was abducted. I came back. I'm cool. I know these guys out there. That's not what he's about. Yeah. He'll tell the story and it's the truth.
As we know, his understanding and appreciation of what happened to him, and we should say here, folks that are not that familiar with this incident, there were multiple witnesses. They all were put through polygraph. It's probably as well documented, a UFO-related contact experiencer taken case as exists on the annals. And you've seen Jennifer Stein's terrific documentary, Travis, the True Story, Travis Walton?
Yeah, that's a great one.
It is. I think it's one of the best, maybe the best, standalone documentaries on a single person's experience. Well, the experience of the men who were with him, it changed their lives too, and not necessarily for the better, as opposed to some of our great documentary filmmakers like Jamie Foxx, who, cover the field in a larger kind of perspective. But Travis's first appreciation of what happened to him was more, I was knocked unconscious, and I was taken aboard and, interfaced with these humanoid types and these gray types. But as the years pass, and upon reflection, and a lot of us kind of evolved with him on it, that jolt of energy. And I don't want people to mystify this at all. This is real. There is science behind it. May well have stopped his heart. And whatever intelligences were behind it, who knows, maybe the craft itself did it, as opposed to a being pushing a button or something like that.
Right. I
But
think that's what it was. Yeah.
taken aboard, and the medical emergency, if that's what it was, dealt with. Also, I remember asking him once how he felt his life might have gone if this hadn't happened. Snowflake, Arizona is about 5,000 population back in the day, and probably not that much different now.
Right. Yeah.
Heavily Mormon. Everybody's, pretty much knew each other. And he is this situation, which cost him dearly and put him through a certain amount of hell. He has evolved into such an articulate spokesperson for experiencers and abductees, and become really a citizen of the world. He fits into no cookie cutter kind of mold. He is his own person. And I never get tired of the realities around his case. Last year, as you know, there were some really, I thought, outrageous attacks on him, whether or not he was lying,
Right.
whether or not, those people, their rationale and their arguments pretty much vaporized within a few months. But it set up some doubt for some people who are the kind of people that look to take other people down, people in public life. And I
Right.
think that was a real shame. But it's human nature. It's the way it is sometimes. The Phoenix Lights, where were you when that extraordinary event happened?
I was at home doing something. I never knew about it at all until the next day when a friend of mine from out of state phoned me and said, "Hey, what was up with that UFO that came over last night?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And I was not into the subject at that point in time. But yeah, I heard about that and I didn't know a thing about it. Although my kids, they were probably maybe 9 and 11 years old kind of thing. They were out in the desert with their dad, I don't know what they're doing, four-wheeling or something. And they saw it. They saw it, and they thought it was very strange. And they said, "Hey, Dad, look, what is that?" And their dad was an aerospace engineer, and he, kind of knew a few things flying around in the skies. And he's like, "I don't know what that is," so. And then they just drove on their way. They didn't do anything about it. They just drove on their way. And I didn't hear about that until a few years later. I didn't know that they had seen that. They never said a word. So, yeah.
It was such a huge event, and it caused so much controversy. As you know now, in retrospect, we had a governor at the time in Arizona, Fife Symington, who saw it. He knew it was real. And yet that, I think partly that fear of ridicule, because back in the day, of course, saying you believed in UFOs for a major politician could be a career destroyer.
Right.
He did something that he apologized for 10 years later in an interview that he did with Leslie Kean. But I remember how genuinely angry and disappointed I was when he did his little press conference.
Yeah.
And then, very smarmy, brought out one of his assistants with an alien head on him, ha, ha, ha. And I think that really aided him for quite a while, and he he made it right, but it was a classic example of making fun of something that frightens you because you
Yeah.
don't know how to deal with it.
And the community around here really didn't think of it as making fun of something. They felt that it was making fun of them. So he demeaned a large part of population of this city because
Yes.
so many people saw that. I mean, there was tens of thousands of witnesses to that event. There was over 1,000 911 calls. People did see this.
Yeah.
And what he did in public on that TV, press conference just made everyone go, "Oh, I hate you." I mean, he really made a lot of enemies doing that.
It's
So
yeah.
I don't think he saw the Phoenix lights. That's just my personal opinion. But when he came forth and said, "Oh, I saw it. Oh, yeah, I was witness to that."
Ah,
I'm just looking at him going, you are a politician and you do it really well. And why should we believe you when you basically lied and made fun of everyone back then just because you say that you saw it?
yeah.
I think that he's just trying to make good with his constituents and just trying to kind of make up for something that he did. I personally don't believe him. I can just look at him and say, no, I don't think so.
That's a very insightful observation. I tend to take people at their word, which has cost me dearly on occasion. At the same time, yeah, that would be something that a politician increasingly concerned about their image, their popularity with their constituency might well do.
Yeah. So I don't, want to make an enemy of him. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just stating my opinion of it, and I believed him at first when he came out and said, he saw that, and I saw James Fox interviewing him on that, and I love the work that James does on that. But I thought, you lied once before, and made a mockery of everything.
Yeah.
So what's to say that you can't be doing this again? You could pull that off. And the more I watched him, the more I thought, no.
In your neighboring state of New Mexico occurred in 1947, probably the best known UFO event in history that we're aware of. Obviously, I'm talking about the crash of summer of 1947 outside of Roswell. Do you remember the first time you heard about Roswell?
It wasn't when I was a kid. I don't know where I was. I mean, I was living in Nevada, and that's not that far away, but I never heard too much about it. I really didn't. I was probably 25 years old when I first heard about it, I think, and living in Arizona at the time. So then it kind of sparked my interest. Yeah, and I started reading up on it, and more stuff came into my view. So I started reading up on that, and then had a chance to go over there in 2008. I think it was the 60th anniversary or something. And I got my two kids and I said, "Hey, guess where we're going on summer vacation, guys? We're going to Roswell." And they're like, "Where?" So yeah, I took my kids over there on summer vacation, and we had a great time. We went to some of the lectures, and that's right. I first met Alejandro Rojas. He was speaking there at the New Mexico Military Institute is where they had all well, the town was kind of split. They had some of the stuff going on there and some of it going on in like a giant white.
Well, the visitor center down on Main Street. Yep.
Yeah. But so I learned a lot more about Roswell by being there, but the Roswell Festival is serious. There's some really great speakers there, and there's a very serious side of it. But then there's that fun, fantastical side of everything there, which is, with their claim to fame that they have, that town has to do that once a year. It's kind of like their Founders Day celebration, and they do it up right. They've got the parade and the speakers and the whole festival thing all through the town, and it's pretty fun. And they do have some of the best fireworks I've ever seen. So
they do.
I got to give them that. But since then, I've learned a lot more about Roswell, just, since I've been involved with MUFON and really studying it. And then, of course, getting invited by Don Schmidt to bring a crew of Phoenix MUFON people over there to help him on this dig. That was really
2013.
insightful. Yeah. Yeah, that was fun.
Tell before we go into the dig, um, for me, I don't know how it was for you. The first time I heard of a UFO festival, um, I had heard that there was one in Roswell that I understood was, I guess, the second year that McMinnville, Oregon, was doing its UFO festival and conference, and I was invited to speak the same year as our dear departed friend, the late great Stanton T. Friedman.
Mhm.
And we both had reservations about it. Stan, of course, far better known, but you consider yourself a serious person in the work, and the term festival doesn't really mesh with what you're trying to project.
Yeah.
But we took a chance, and I was sold.
You
Um,
had a great time, didn't you?
yes, tremendous.
McMinnville. Yeah,
I,
McMinnville is really fun. It is. It's great fun. Yeah.
it was, and they did it right. And in McMinnville, it's based on the famous sighting and photographs of the farmers, Mr. and Mrs. Trent,
Hmm.
who in May of 50, as I recall, had a craft pass over their home, had enough time to take two photos. People of unimpeachable character, who it's important to note never copyright those photos and could have made considerable money on them over the decades. They've been included in every anthology, etc. And it was the business community that rediscovered the event about 2000, 2001 and decided to give it a go. Um, it's, I, well, 2 weeks ago, I spoke at the Edinburgh, Texas UFO Festival and Conference, 20 minutes from the Mexican border, to an audience unlike one that I had ever spoken at. I had a great time. They have a crash in their history in the 1960s. Speakers were taken out there the first night that we arrived and basically given the whole story. The first day of the event on the Friday is the festival, and the second day is the conference, and they're very separate events. Wonderfully schizophrenic, over the top, a lot of fun. And same, for McMinnville, and Roswell's is more integrated. But there are a number of these things growing around the country, and there should be. Exeter, New Hampshire, and we have one now coming into, I think it's sixth or seventh year in New York State. Well, it's the Pine Bush
Mhm.
UFO Festival and Conference, which is such a tiny little burg, they can't even accommodate an event like that. So it's held in the next town over. Pine Bush having the largest incident of corroborated UFO sightings and strange happenings in the area of any location in the Northeast here. For me, any municipality that has a legitimate right to put on something like this should. Every community is strapped. It's one more way to get people into your area. It's one more way to educate people at the same time as having a good time, especially for kids, demystify the subject. And Roswell, of course, is still, the godfather of them all.
Yeah.
Um, Don Schmidt, of course, and Tom Carey, among others, have produced a remarkably powerful series of books on Roswell. Um, the same thing for Kevin Randall. These are major pioneers in the work. Stan Friedman, of course. How did you connect up with Don in 2013 to have an opportunity with your team to work this dig? And tell us a little about what you did there.
Okay. Well, we had Dawn out as a speaker for Phoenix MUFON a couple of times prior to 2013. And he always had such a fun time and just found the group of Phoenix MUFON people, so willing to work and do stuff and so hospitable and just
Yeah.
nice folks. So he called me up and he said, I know you guys do good work and you like to do good work. How would you like to come out and, work big and do stuff in Roswell? And I said, yeah, we'll be there. How many you need? And he says, well, how about, 10? Can you bring 10? I said, I can bring 10. So we had 10 of us go over to Roswell and we loaded up and carpooled over there with, you know, clothing because it was October and it can get really cold out there.
You bet it can.
So we had, farm implements. I mean, we had hoes and rakes and shovels and metal detectors and binoculars and, everything that we could possibly bring with us.
Yeah.
And then he had, there was, I think, 5 film crews there. He had Jaime Muson and his crew from Mexico. There was a group from Amsterdam. There was a group from Atlanta, Georgia. There was one from the UK. And that may have been it. So that's 4. But it was, it was well documented.
Yeah.
And he had maybe 10 or 15 other people there working too. So we had a pretty big crew. And Don was there and Tom Carey. And so Don had, gotten hotels for everyone and lined up meals for us to take out there.
Terrific.
We had a RV out there for our bathroom, and we had rental cars. Everyone had an SUV. So we had maybe 6 or 7 SUVs from a rental company there. And it's not close. People think it's right outside of Roswell. It's 100 miles away from Roswell.
Yeah.
So we made it there in about 1 hour every day. Really. 100 miles an hour driving out there. It was just the fastest thing. But we would leave about 5 a.m. and it was 27 degrees in the morning when we got out there. It was cold.
For an Arizonan, freezing.
Yeah. But it would warm up, a little bit. It would warm up into maybe the mid 60s, but the wind blew like a demon. I mean, just constantly. There's nothing out there to stop it. It's pretty barren land.
You are
the wind just blows. Yep. So we were windburned. I mean, our faces were just red from the windburn for, I think we were out there 3 days in a row. And we dug and we plotted. Everything was mapped out in 10-foot square grids. And we had hundreds of those, and we covered each of those with the metal detectors and the strainers and the shovels, and we're down on our hands and knees. And it was a lot of rough work, but it was really rewarding. I mean, it was really fun being out there and working with people and trying to find something, and we were talking about looking into some of the animal burrows that are out there on the ground, because, animals find stuff and they take it down into their burrow, so there could be stuff that's down in there that you never would suspect. But we had some, ground penetrating radar and some really cool stuff out there and a lot of smart people. And we just kind of did the work hoping to find something. And it was a lot of fun. And, yeah.
Which brings me to the question, when all was said and done, was anything unearthed or discovered that was of a particularly interesting nature?
Yes. But I'm not sure if it's something we can actually talk about.
Then don't.
There's one piece of something that's housed very secretly right now. It's controversial. And that's about all I can say about it.
Okay. But that's fun. Exciting in itself.
We found a lot of interesting stuff out there, though. I mean, we did find a lot of buttons off of clothing, metal buttons off of Army uniforms.
Interesting.
So, because we had the metal detectors going everywhere, and we found a lot of that. When the Army came in there and scoured the area, they were on their hands and knees, going across the ground. They needed to find every piece of anything that might be there. So I'm thinking they're popping buttons off their uniform, left and right. So we found, some Army buttons out there. We found a lot of nails, just thousands and thousands of nails out here in the dirt.
How interesting.
And Don told me that they had come in there, the Army had come in there later after there were so many people out there looking for anything. They had come in there and just dumped nails over the whole area so that anyone coming in with a metal detector
son of a bitch,
so discouraged from finding so many nails all day long that they would never come out there and look again.
That in itself is worthy of great note. If nothing happened, if it was, the mythical weather balloon.
Why go to the trouble to, cover something up or mislead you? Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me of the great Shakespeare line, methinks the lady doth protest too much.
Yes. Doth.
That I was not aware of that. That's intriguing.
Yeah, it was.
Did you have a chance to obviously spend some time at the Museum and Research Center?
Yes, yes, we did spend some time there, and I think there's actually some stuff on the wall about that dig.
Yes.
I had some friends here in town that had been over there at Roswell at the visitor center, and they said, "Hey, we saw your picture up on the wall in Roswell," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, you didn't." And they're like, "Yeah, yeah, you're up there in that dig thing that you did." So I think Don has made something there to document, uh, and he's had, I think, 2 or 3 digs. We only went on this one so far. We're planning on doing another one, but I think he's done a few digs, and so I think he's got some things, documented up there, and people can take a look and read about it.
For serious students of the subject like us, seeing that library for the first time, everything Dewey Decimal System, was quite mind-boggling.
Yeah,
It probably is the greatest publicly accessible UFO library in the Western world, certainly in the English language. Um, you know, um, as a book lover, as a library lover, I remember my first visit there and just having my jaw drop. I had no idea of the size of the collection. We know a great New Mexican and a friend of the work and a remarkable researcher, investigator, and archivist, David Marler,
right.
is
I was
building
just
an archive like nobody's business.
right.
Has he spoken for your group?
He has, and he's actually coming this next month to speak to us again.
Great.
So not only does he have fantastic information on triangular UFOs
Yeah,
and new information on that subject, but he holds one of the biggest archives of UFO related material anywhere. He's got
absolutely.
his house, I think, is full. It's got rooms of filing
Huh.
cabinets that are full of documents and books. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would love to see that in person.
You and me both. That's definitely on the list. And
Yeah,
David is such a gracious guy. I mean, he and his wife maintain a guest room for visitors like us. It's just a matter of getting ourselves there.
yeah,
He is one of my heroes in the work, and his archive, which will end up ultimately in the auspices of the University of New Mexico and the Roswell Library, both of them and their archives continue to just keep growing. It makes New
great.
Mexico ultimately the destination state for researchers of the present, researchers of the future. Again, anybody can go in and sit and read all day in the Roswell Library. Uh, with David, of course, you have to make an appointment. It is his home,
Yeah,
uh, but it also, for me, um, as a passionate reader, it is so exciting to see people turning to vinyl, and starting to build record collections. They're not just retro freaks. They understand there's a difference. And to, the people talking about, wow, I got this great second edition of this book, or it's signed by taking pride in building their libraries. I think that's really important.
yeah, it is. It is because we need to spread the word, and if people want to go and sit and study for a day or two, they can. That's nice.
Um, we're coming up to our first break, but before we do, um, have you? I expect you've had Lynn Katai speak there.
We have. Yep, she's a local here, of course. She's a medical doctor that really brought the whole Phoenix Lights thing to light for everyone, and she's just been a real trooper on bringing that to the public. And yeah, she's a very valuable person in this subject.
She is, and she is a force in nature. I mean, that woman is unstoppable.
Uh-huh.
Also, when I started doing this show, one of my promises to myself was I was going to have as many women as guests as I could, as in almost every other area of public endeavor, women work twice as hard for half the recognition. And you and she are perfect examples of women who are making this field much more accessible and welcoming to women, and we can use everyone that we can get, no question about it.
Hmm.
Um, in your group, as far as like regular meeting attendees, is it sort of breaking down 50-50 men and women, or is, one gender dominating?
I'd say it's probably 50-50. Yeah.
That's great.
And the age range of everyone is almost, 50 on up. No, I would say maybe 35 on up.
That's
It
great.
does seem to cater to a more mature audience. I don't know why. I think younger people don't like to sit and listen to lectures so much. They'd rather read it on the phone or, Google it or something like that. So we get, our attendees are a little older.
And are you back to doing live events now? Because of
We
course,
are.
good.
Yes,
I'm glad to hear that.
since this last October. So we've got about 7 under our belt now, and we're going strong. Yeah.
Brilliant. Are you still using the same hall that you were using, the same space when I spoke there some years ago?
No, we keep outgrowing spaces. So now we're at the Arizona Historical Society Museum.
Brilliant.
And inside this giant state-run, beautiful thing is a big auditorium that seats 300, and it's very similar to a big movie theater.
I love it.
So that's where we're at, and it's just gorgeous.
Hold that thought, because we are coming to a break.
Okay.
This is Peter Robbins with my special guest tonight, Stacey Wright, Director of Phoenix MUFON, and we will be back at the top of the hour. Stay with us.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Scrolling all day, time can disappear. Wanna make it count? Why not volunteer?
Posting pics of your food, that takes up time. Time, you've got time to binge all of season 9, though it got so bad.
Time, you got time. We're gonna grow back and be the same browse you had.
Just a few hours to keep families from harm. Help us end home fires, but sound the alarm.
Volunteer for a day to install free smoke alarms in your community.
Discover the Observation Deck, a one-of-a-kind virtual event platform that takes video conferencing to the next level by using avatars to navigate a campus. There's so many areas and activities to choose from. There's a 1,000-seat auditorium, an expo hall, a nightclub, and even a beach. So come attend a conference, take a class, or hear a lecture on the incredible Observation Deck campus. Go to theobservationdk.com.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
Hi, and welcome back to Meanwhile Here on Earth with my special guest, Stacey Wright, and I'm your host, Peter Robbins. Stacey, as you know better than most people, every year MUFON International holds an international symposium in a different city in the United States. This year, coming up in July, it is in Denver. Will you be there, and how will you be involved?
I will be there, yes. I'm not real familiar with Denver, so I'm excited to go there. I'm going in early because I will be helping Katie Grabowski, who is the Colorado State MUFON Director. I'm helping her put on the field investigator training that'll be held on Thursday, July 8-ish, whatever that date is. I can't think of it right now, but MUFON does hold a big field investigator training, and that's the day before everything starts. They have different excursion events that you can go on, as well as the field investigator training. So I'll be doing that, and then just attending some of the lectures, throughout the rest of the weekend, which are always, top-notch speakers and the most up-to-date, legit information that you can find.
You should be aware and remind people when you see them that July 8th is the 75th anniversary of the very first news coverage of the crash at Roswell.
Yeah.
I have not been to an international symposium in about half a dozen years, but I'm really excited and honored that they have invited me to give a presentation this year. And so I will be seeing you for the first time in several years.
Yeah.
And looking forward to catching up in human corporeal form.
Yes, we need to do that. Yeah. I think the last time, well, no, not the last time, but one of the times that I've seen you was when you spoke to us here, and then I took you up to Sedona, and I believe you spoke at Sedona MUFON as well, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And we went out to the Bradshaw Ranch to try to find some of the weirdness out there.
Yeah, I was just looking at some of the photos I took out there.
Yeah.
It is, well, very photogenic place. I mean, Arizona's got to be one of the most beautiful states in the nation. You can't turn your camera around without seeing another extraordinary view in so many parts of the state. Can you tell us a little about the Bradshaw Ranch? Because it really is quite a legendary location for folks who are students of the unknown and the mysterious.
Well, it's been an area that has been, the unknown and the mysterious. Sedona in itself is an area of very high magnetics. You can see it in the rocks there. The rocks are red. That means rust. That means iron.
That's right. Yep.
So it's a very magnetic area, and maybe the reason why they have so many sightings and so much anomalous things going on there is because these off-world visitors are attracted to this. We're not sure, but that's just a theory, that people have come up with. But there's a ranch outside of town that is very similar to something like Skinwalker Ranch up in Utah, where there's a lot of anomalous things that have happened there, and it's just really creepy. And so Peter and I went out there with a couple people that lived there in Sedona, and just tried to go out there and, see what was going on. But it looked pretty ordinary that day, didn't it? It didn't seem like there was, it didn't feel too creepy. It just felt like an old ghost town kind of a place.
Well,
but the stories that have come out of there are just of the highest strangeness.
For me, it was maybe more pronounced than for you, because it was unlike any place I had ever visited before. And it is like time stands still. The buildings are accessible. You look into the kitchen and, there are plastic flowers in an enameled coffee pot and dusty photos on the wall. And, your imagination really takes off. Also, Sedona itself is one of the most legendary, I'll say, vortex centers. It is not a standard piece of real estate. And of course, it has attracted quite a number of extraordinary people who now call it home. And I just found it completely fascinating wherever I went. It really is a unique location. On the symposium, I wanted to ask you, because a lot of people may think, oh, this is an international symposium by this organization. Obviously, this is not something for me. I just have a casual interest in the subject. But this is an event that is open to anyone that wants to attend. Am I correct?
Right. Oh, yes. It's open to the public, and registration is open now. So you can go online to MUFON.com and find out about the symposium. So it will be a 3-day event in Denver, July 8th through 11th or something like that. I don't have a calendar. Well, yeah, I do. It is July 7th. Yeah, 7th through the 10th. So, but we have some of the top, world-class speakers that are there on subjects, and there's events, and there's banquets, and there's forums and there's workshops, and
Yes.
you can find out anything that interests you there. There's a vendor room where you can buy books from some of these great authors that are there and talking about their subject matter. And you can buy, t-shirts and different things. And it's just, if there's something that you want to know about the UFO world, go there and you will find something out about it. It's just really, a great weekend of fun, and it's put on by a very legitimate organization. So, the stuff is for real.
I think also it's important to let people know that all these people are completely accessible. They're not hidden away, until they go out and speak or being treated like celebrities. They are right there. You can engage any of these people. Plus, it's a chance to establish contact with folks who are at various stages of learning in this work. We're all students in it. Nobody, graduates. You just keep learning in class, so to say. But it's a wonderful mixture of people. And for me, more and more in my work, I realize, although I'm as fascinated and as curious with the thems and the interdimensional aspect of it, and the more Jacques Vallée and John Keel kind of philosophies that are separate from extraterrestrial hypothesis, but it is a place of ongoing conversation with intelligent people who are informed, and a place where really some very important and wonderful friendships can be established. So if you're hesitant about it and you're able to get away, come and join us. Look us up when you're there. We'll be happy to hang with you as well as everybody else.
Yeah. And another wonderful thing that they have there is the experiencer room.
I was just about to say.
Yeah. So if you're an experiencer, you think you've had contact or you're experiencing something with an otherworldly being, they have rooms where you can go and, there's a group of people in there and everyone sits in a big circle and you can talk about your experience, and you can find people that have similar circumstances happen to them, and you get to talk these things out and you find out that you're not alone. There's other people out there just like yourself, and you learn about it. So with knowledge, becomes, a little more bravery. And it's just really a great thing that we have the experiencer team, and it's led by Kathleen Martin and George Medich, and they do a wonderful job of that. Really wonderful. And it's just resource.
Earl Grey, our friend Earl Grey Anderson will also be involved.
Right.
And like the original, very first UFO abductee experiencer support group meetings, which were held in the home of Bud Hopkins for many years, a seminal figure in the work and a pioneering researcher in this area of study, you are in a safe space. The understanding is, and that what goes on in the room, what's said in the room, stays in the room.
Right.
Trust is established, and it's really set up so that's the first event of every day. You can, if you are an experiencer or an abductee, you can start your day off there, and then, listen to the lectures, meet people at meal times, go to this great banquet that, of course, is a big part of it every year. I wanted to ask you about the MUFON Field Investigator Boot Camp that Phoenix MUFON sponsors each November. Once again, if you want to become an accredited MUFON Field Investigator, there is a terrific guide that's constantly being updated over the years. But what you've created here is something beyond that. Can you give us an idea of what goes on?
I can. It's every year, the first weekend in November. And this year, I believe it's going to be November 4th, 5th, 6th. We hold and it's great weather in Phoenix. So it's really a good time of year to come here and do this. But it's a 3-day event where we teach you how to be a field investigator, some of the finer points of doing this. You don't come out with your card saying you are a field investigator. You still have to take the exam and pass it. But this is very concentrated. It's just the coursework is great. We have mornings full of classroom instruction, And in the afternoons, we go out into the desert and we do forensic field work. And our forensic fieldwork sessions are taught by none other than the Arizona Navajo Rangers. And they are the best at what they do. And so that's, John Dover and Stan Milford. And they do a phenomenal job of teaching us how to do forensic fieldwork. And then our morning sessions, again, are classroom instructions. So we have subjects such as advanced interviewing techniques, healthy versus unhealthy mental states, because that's a big part of it. You have to know who you're talking to and whether these people are really seeing what they're seeing or not. We've got photo and video analysis. We've got a course in astronomy. We teach you how to go through our case management system and understand it and the protocols used for that. So it's really just a great bunch of information. And we only have 40 participants each year. So as they open up that registration, probably about, I'm assuming right after the symposium is done in July in Denver, they will open up the registration for that boot camp. So again, there's only room for 40 people. And we have a great hotel with great rates that you stay at. And we feed you well. And we show you the desert. And we go out to the desert and have a big sky watch out there after the forensic field work is done. And we cook you a camp out dinner out there in the desert. And we have Mark D'Antonio, who teaches our astronomy course. And he runs the sky watch. So he kind of follows up and shows you the real deal while you're out there under this beautiful sky. So it's just a great fun weekend. And, people love it. And we've had people come back year after year because they loved it so much and they just want to pick up on some more points that they can use. And we have people that are already field investigators that are already perhaps the chief investigator for their state, but they want to come in and, get some of these finer tips and techniques that we offer. So it's really a lot of fun and it's great information.
You sent along just a few photos and I'd like for us to take a look at them right now.
Okay.
Outstanding card.
So what's really funny about this is this was during a film crew had come from Denmark, and the blonde guy there, I can't remember his name, was part of the crew from Denmark, and they were filming us out in the desert. They wanted to see how we did field investigations. So we brought him out there and we're showing him some stuff. And our photographer, Chris Loomis, who does just a phenomenal job, was just taking some pictures out there. So he captured me in the background there. And then that's Dennis Fairmuth with the sunglasses on. And he is our chief investigator, looking all serious there. And then this nice blonde guy here is from Denmark. He's not a MUFON member, and he has no idea that he's the face of MUFON. It's the advertisement, for becoming a field investigator. But he's okay with it, and it just makes a really great picture. But that's just a funny little anecdote I had to.
That's great. That's the way it is sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this was an event where the movie, where the Project Blue Book show was just coming out.
Yeah.
So they asked us to come to, I think we were at a big, like a Harkins Theater or something like that. And that's Alejandro Rojas on the left and me, and then Lynn Kitai, and then Dr. Sky, who is, an astronomer and gives a lot of talks on the subject here. So they just had us posing up there by the sign at the premiere of this.
And moving on. Is this at the date?
This is one of our, we have an annual camp out that we do. Phoenix MUFON goes up in the mountains here, and people don't know this, but we have some beautiful high country here. Yes. You would think you're in the top of the Rockies. It's all aspens and pine trees and beautiful country up there. So we go up there every October and have a big camp out. We have maybe 30 to 35 people up there just having a great time for 3 days. And this is a bunch of us who were just out hiking one day and stopped for a photo op.
Outstanding.
We have a lot of fun. We do a lot of fun things throughout the year to keep everyone interested and really enjoy the fellowship.
And a great shot of you here.
Well, that's me cooking at our at the end of our boot camp that we put on for the field investigators. We feed them. So the deck of the pool at this beautiful hotel where we stay, they have the big barbecue out there on the pool deck, and I'm cooking about 75 pieces of chicken on the grill there. So that's all smoke in the background that you see. Yeah.
Fabulous. Let's widen our discussion a bit now. We are at an extraordinary moment in the history of ufology, for lack of a better word, although some people really dish on it and put it down. There are so many armchair critics out there who have read a few books, check websites and pontificate, have opinions on everything. At the same time, as we all know, things have changed in the public mindset based on a real change in the way the media reports this starting in 2018. And now, the stuff that we grew up with, the UFO report comes on and the newsreader is, their eyebrows are going, they're grinning, their body language suggests that they're not taking it seriously, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It was the way it was. And now, not only is it taken seriously, but even more interestingly, it has absolutely shattered certain aspects of traditional political divides. You have it being taken seriously on Fox and on CNBC. And in Congress right now, for me, I guess the best examples I can give, in the Republican Party, you have people like Marco Rubio of Florida, who is very outspoken on wanting to get to the bottom of this, and Senator from my state, Kirsten Gillibrand, who also has put forward a remarkable proposal, which has been passed. We live in different times. Any thoughts on that? Because you've seen it change from an administrative point of view as the head of one of the most active chapters in this area of study.
Well, it's nothing but exciting right now. And I just count myself so lucky to be living in these times and seeing this happen before our eyes. A lot of people only read about this, and then they only read about it by the author's perspective. So it's just great to be able to be living this part of everything and seeing it come out in print and seeing the newscasters talk about it without their giggle factor getting in the way.
Yes.
And, the stuff that has come out from our military, from the Pentagon, from the Navy, it's just groundbreaking stuff. And it's not what we were hoping, disclosure with a big D. It's disclosure with a little d. And we're seeing it as it's progressing. It is a daily movement forward, not just a big giant thing where the spaceships are going to land on the White House lawn. We're seeing it little by little. And if you really follow what's going on by some of these very credible journalists that are out there, you're going to find out everything you need to know. Brian Bender with Politico is doing some amazing work and reporting everything. And there's a lot of people out there. George Knapp has come forward with so much stuff over the years. And he's just a great journalist and really a good human being as well. So it's kudos to all of these people for coming forth. And, even some of the politicians and people that, if you really look at it, they are looking at you and they're saying, well, yeah, it's all true. Yeah. Sorry, we lied to you. Yeah, it's true. That's really what they're saying. They just don't know how to come out and say that because, they might get thrown in jail. It's kind of treason to be lying to the public like that.
Exactly.
But it's very exciting to see this happening. Yeah, I'm loving it. It's kind of an I told you so moment, and that's always fun.
Again, in this past incarnation, for a politician to publicly suggest that they took truly anomalous UFOs, whatever they represent, seriously, could cost them their career. Mm-hmm. The same thing for academics, the same thing for scientists, and Lord knows the same thing for astronomers. Now we have people, what was the name of the astronomer in that picture with you and Alejandro and Lynn?
Dr. Sky.
There you go. Yeah. To actually present yourself on the side of openly curious and involved. People like Avi Loeb at Harvard,
right,
who a number of years ago would probably, well, who knows with Avi, but probably not have risked the ridicule that might have been attached, especially with such a prestigious organization, well, a prestigious academic group.
Even
thinking back,
I don't think he would have done it even 2 years ago.
Well, you think back again, we're talking apples and oranges here in that Avi is involved in strict statistical analysis, but going back, to the 90s when John Mack was called on the carpet for and basically censured for the first time since Timothy Leary was, put through the ringer in the 60s. This is a changing time. And I would encourage, anybody in academia or in the sciences not to, to read a well-documented UFO book, to tune in some of the better podcast shows, to make a point of watching some of the better documentaries and join us, because this is important work. And I can't think of another field that has the potential to bring people from every possible background together with a common cause and a common curiosity, and as a byproduct, understanding that no matter how much we feel separates us as human beings, we have a lot more that we have in common than we may with some of these other intelligences. And that brings me to another question for you, Stacey. There are emerging, not that they've always been there, going back to the onset and comparing, say, Donald Keyhoe to the early contactees in the 50s. We have, let's say, representing one group is Louis Elizondo, who has a background in military and in government. People like Christopher Mellon, a highly placed administrator in the American government. And on the other side, people like Ray Hernandez and Free, doing great work documenting the experience of experiencers who overwhelmingly feel that this is a very positive thing that's going on, where on the other side, there's more, nuts and bolts caution about what we're facing. What are your thoughts on these two growing factions? And do you see this coming up in group meetings or in discussions or, animated exchanges between people that you deal with?
Well, I see a progression in that, let's say 15 years ago, these groups were talking about the nuts and bolts, the hardware, maybe the propulsion of these craft that are flying through the skies that are being seen. And that's all they were about. And now everyone wants to know who's driving. And that's really, the interesting part is why are they here? What are they doing? How long have they been here? How is this going to affect our lives? Well, it's opening up our minds is how it's affecting our lives. And it's causing us to maybe, become closer as a whole species than what we have been acting like in the past. I think it's a great thing. I mean, the intelligence that has come out of, Christopher Mellon and Lou Elizondo and what they brought to us through that, intel is great. I mean, this is it's beyond great. So we love the work that they're doing, and there's so many others like them.
Yeah.
And, we just really need to try to find out, all band together, go to meetings, go read books, go discuss something with someone, find something out, because this is really a life-changing thing going on in our world.
It also brings up the question, what you said, Phoenix MUFON being, I guess, as good a microcosm of the world of people involved in UFO studies as anything, that we have to remember that when we talk about them, we're talking very likely about a myriad of thems, plural, from intelligences who are, it seems almost ironic to me now that the most conservative, in some cases dismissed theoretics around this have to do with the extraterrestrial hypothesis. There's a great deal of renewed interest in kind of the groundwork laid by pioneers like Jacques Vallée and John Keel, more amorphous, more ethereal, interdimensional possibilities, time travel possibilities. But at the same time, it's a Big Ten. It reminds me the parable about the 6 blind men and the elephant, and they're trying to establish to each other what the elephant is. One's got his arm wrapped around a leg, another one's holding a tusk, another one's got the trunk, another one's holding the tail, another one's patting the elephant. And they are all arguing about what the elephant is. But of course, it is all those things. And I still see a fair amount of kind of head shaking arguments on the subject of them when, again, this universe, this cosmos is such a huge backyard. And even the most conservative astronomers even begrudgingly have to admit and do admit that we are dealing with probably at least tens of millions of Earth-sized planets, about the same difference from sun-sized stars, giving us the basic building blocks, depending on whether you're a person of faith or a pragmatist, well, you can be both, of the miracle of creation or the primordial ooze that first one-celled animal crawls out of, splits, and the race is on. Do you see in your work that there are basically factions, or people are basically open to the whole thing at once?
People are realizing that it is all connected. So whether you're interested in whatever camp of thought you think the aliens are, whether they are from another world, from another time, maybe they are co-indigenous of this planet with us. You've got Bigfoot, you've got some paranormal, you've got ghosts, you've got near-death experiences. And if you study all of these things, you're going to see some dots that can be connected. There's interdimensionality here. There's stuff that we just don't understand, but we're starting to. You know, our scientists know that we've got, you know, more parallel universes out there than we ever thought before. That's really interesting stuff. I can't put it all together because my head would blow off my shoulders if I tried, but there are some dots that can be connected, and you know that somehow it is all related, somehow. So you can get people that, you know, are different camps of thought that can come together and all have a great time discussing stuff. Yeah. Because they know a little about this and they know a little about this, and oh, they really know a little about this and they've experienced this. And you just need to put that all together, and it's the community of this. It's just amazing. You know, people are really coming alive with this.
You know, Stacey, as you're speaking, I'm thinking you, because you are the kind of person you are, and because you happen to be director of this very active chapter of the largest UFO research organization in the world, with events like the boot camp or social events that you have, or working on something like the Roswell digs, there have to be times where at night people are sitting around and they're just thinking out loud, exchanging stories, sharing experiences, talking about cases that they've worked on. Any that come to mind right now that you'd like to share that really stay with you, that have stuck in your mind, people's experiences that you take seriously, that somebody not as tuned to this might say, well, that's crazy. That one is over the top. Sorry, I can't, you know, accept that.
Well, yeah, you know, there's all different levels of belief and skepticism. So it all, you know, needs to start with a healthy dose of skepticism. We got to start with that. We can't believe everything that we hear. Yeah. And I hear a lot every day. I've heard it all. It's got to be something pretty fantastic that comes along nowadays that really catches me. But there's a couple of cases that are surprising to me, and how they work out. Like there was this one case that I was working with our mutual friend Marianne Robb. There was a gentleman who lived on the outskirts of Phoenix, where it bordered up against the desert. So he's got a perimeter fence there between his land and BLM land, which is just desert. Yes. A lot of animals roaming around there. You know, you've got javelina, coyote, just all kinds of things up there. Bobcats, mountain lions. And so people like to put water holes out there, and then they set a trail cam up, and they like to have, you know, a view of what's coming up to the water hole at night. So they can see all these wild animals that you can't see during the daytime. So this gentleman had done that, and he, wrote a report into MUFON and said, I caught a flying saucer flying right over my house. This is the most extraordinary footage. You've got to see this. So I accompanied Marianne Robb, who was the field investigator on the case, and we went up to North Scottsdale and met this person at a Starbucks up there and looked at his stuff on his laptop. And it was amazing. I mean, right there was some video footage of this craft just cruising right over the roof of his house, straight at the trail cam. And we're like, wow, how did you catch this? He's like, I didn't do anything. I just had the trail cam up there. So our chief investigator, Dennis Freiermuth, is a master at photo and video analysis. And he's just the best. I put him up against anyone in the world. He's great at what he does. So we had him analyze this. And what we found out in the end was that this wasn't really a craft coming in. This was a long spider web floating in on the breeze, doing this motion, and it had some very small drops of moisture attached to it that was catching the light. So it was lighting up these little drops on this strand, which looked about this long. So it looked like an elongated ship, and it was lit, and it was coming right at you. And it was a spider web. And we've seen, and we were just floored by this because it looked so cool and so real, And we all wanted it to be real, but it was a spider web. And
well, it was real, but it was a real spider web.
It was a real spider web. And since then, we've seen things where people have the Ring doorbell and they've got the camera on that, and they're seeing things floating by. They're seeing, it's not moths, it's not bugs. They're seeing entities on their doorstep. And a lot of times it's a spider web. And that's just so surprising to me and almost funny in a way that, we can take something that simple and it can surprise us and interest us to such a degree, and there's a lot of fun in looking at this stuff, and you really learn a lot about people and, their beliefs. And I hate to let them down or burst their bubble on some of these things, but they're really, grateful that we found out the truth behind this. Yeah. And it makes them even more interested in stuff too. So, we've had a lot of people who started out with just a sighting that they reported in, and they've become field investigators for us because it's just really fun.
I'm so glad you use that as an example, because I think a lot of times people think of us as just the mantra of the X-Files famous poster, I want to believe. And that's what our lives are all about. We want to know the truth. And that's a big difference. It's wonderful that you have access to somebody like Dennis, who really is a pro at this. And as you and I know, Marianne is not just a great UFO investigator. This is a woman that has spent her life, her adult life, in law enforcement. And she's retired now, right?
Yes, she had 34 years on the police department. So she's a master investigator, and that's why, I think we have, so many law enforcement people on our group. They love the investigative process. And if they retire or whatever, they still want to do that. And a lot of the police protocols are very similar to the UFO protocols that we use in doing cases.
Absolutely.
Slight change there, but some of the things are the same, and they just love doing the work, and they're very good at it.
I am really fortunate in that before Marianne retired, and I was a guest of her and her late husband, Don, who we miss very much. I went on a ride along with her, and I spent most of a day watching her do what she did. And, starting with roll call, it was fascinating from beginning to end, and watching her in situations that could have evolved into something really rather frightening or out of control or dark, how wonderful and how intuitive she was as somebody who knew how to disarm a situation. These people are above and beyond as investigators because, as you note, they come to UFO investigation with the world of law enforcement investigation. We can't have too many of them in the work. At the same time, anybody can make a good investigator. Make no mistake about that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and we'll train you. Anyone who wants to become a field investigator, we will train you to be that good. And it's not sorcery. It's mastery. So we can do this.
Among the speakers that you have had over the years, you have had some of the most noteworthy people in the field. Remembering back, who were one or two that really impressed you, and equally as important, who really left the membership, with a night that or an afternoon that they will not forget?
Wow, we've had so many. I would have to definitely list George Knapp. We've had him speak to us twice. Once in 2008 when he talked all about Skinwalker Ranch, because that was just, that was I loved that subject and no one was talking about it. And he wrote the book with Colm Kelleher,
That's right.
Hunt for the Skinwalker. And so he spoke about that then, and then he came back just 2 years ago and spoke with Jeremy Corbell all about how OSAP and ATIP is coming out. So it was just like from beginning to end of this subject, and it was phenomenal. So, I would have to list George Knapp as one of those people. Stanton Friedman spoke to us twice. And he's truly unforgettable, just the best. And we've just had some really great people. We recently just had John Ramirez,
oh my gosh,
retired CIA, and he was great. I mean, he was really surprising. I told him, I said, you are just such a surprise. I feel enlightened by what I just heard in the last 3 hours of your presentation. He was really good. So, I mean, if anyone out there is listening and they have a MUFON group and they want a great speaker, John Ramirez, and yeah, he's really good. But so many good people. David Paulides. I mean, if his subject is not so much UFO, but he used to talk about Bigfoot quite a bit, and now he talks about his whole series of missing 411.
Oh boy,
documentation.
Yeah,
that is an afternoon that you will never forget listening to that man talk. And I think some of the stuff that people walk away with, the slightly creepy stuff is what sticks with you.
Very creepy in some senses. And let's stay on that for a little bit. The series of books 411 have been tremendously popular and really have crossed a lot of lines that I would have not expected. We're talking about people who go for a hike and go missing forever.
Right.
It's some very dark possibilities. Obviously, some folks, if there's no evidence, will veer toward believing in the paranormal or permanent abduction. Other people, there are serial killers out there that are, killing people off and hiding the bodies. Personally, what are your feelings around this incredible number of people that go missing, especially in wilderness areas or, areas that you can find in parts of Arizona every year?
I personally believe that there's something interdimensional going on. I think that there are portals, there are vortex spots where the veil between our world and this next world right next door that we just can't see in our spectrum of vision, it's there. There's a veil that's very thin between some of these places. And sometimes I think people can actually walk through them. There might be something that comes out of them and gets the people and takes them back. I'm not sure, but the circumstances surrounding these incredible, I don't know, they're not really crimes, but they're just happenings. I mean, they're just beyond belief, and they just can't be. You just read the details and it's like, this can't be. How did that 3-year-old climb 400 feet straight up that rock wall and end up on that ledge unharmed? How does that happen? Just different things like this. You got to read some of his books to know what I'm talking about. And again, it's David Paulides, and his series of books is called Missing 411. Yeah. And he talks about all different areas of the nation and the national parks where these things have been going on. And so he's got like Missing 411 West, East, North, South. He's got one that's called The Hunters, which I think is fascinating because these disappearances are happening to people who are skilled outdoorsmen. they're out there. They are armed to the teeth.
Yep.
They know how to live. They know how to build fire. They know how to build shelter. They know how to find water. They know how to take care of themselves. They know how to listen. They've got the best visual optics in the world. They're just, armed to the teeth with materials for survival. And these things are still happening to them. How does that happen? And a lot of them are very young, strapping young men, even like firefighters that work out every day. They're in their mid-30s, and these things are happening to them. And sometimes they find them, sometimes they don't. It's just an incredible bunch of documentation that he's come up with, and it's just really fun reading. So
let me ask you, from hearing him as a speaker, getting to know him a little, and reading the books, can you give us one or two capsule particular cases that really stay with you in terms of this one is really an extreme example of this, or this is one that's really bothered me, or I've wondered about what happened to this person, from your reading or from the lectures, one or two that stand out?
I've read so many of these things, and I just ordered his newest book, which is Missing 411 Idaho. So all of these stories are from Idaho, from years back into the mid 1800s until current day. Gosh, there's just so many of them. I mean, the one that I mentioned about the little 3-year-old that ended up on a rock cliff, a ledge on a rock cliff. He was not carried up there by a wild animal. He did not have the wounds for that. But he's on a ledge 300 miles straight up this rock wall. And the search and rescue crew had been looking everywhere. I mean, this just doesn't happen. It really doesn't happen. There's no answer to it. There's just so many weird things. And the thing about the hunters, I mean, really that kind of haunts me, because I know a lot of hunters, and I know how they work, and they're all about survival, and they're not going to let the land destroy them or whatever is out there. It's just creepy enough to, it's great reading. So you guys just got to get one of his books and read it. It's great.
Absolutely. For somebody that is just getting involved in this work and wants to have a recommendation of a number of what you consider as a professional in this area, what are some of the most important or valuable introductory books? I mean, it can be a serious case book, one that we consider a classic, or, a smaller study, but books that you would recommend to people to start educating themselves on the parameters of the UFO question.
Okay. Like I mentioned before, any book by Graham Hancock. You're going to get your history lesson, your archaeological lesson, your medicine lesson. And it just is a way to open up your mind to possibilities.
Yes.
But they're documented things. So Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock, all up to his latest one, which I think is America Before. He's got just a bunch of great books, and he will not mention the word aliens or UFOs in these books. He just relates it in a way without those two words, and he won't speak those words if you go to hear him talk, but you know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And he'll give you that head nod. Mm-hmm. You know what he's talking about. He knows you know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
So anything by Graham Hancock, a great book if you want to learn how to or how not to look at evidence in the best light, is a book by Chase Kletsky.
Yes.
Called Admissible.
It is.
And in Arizona MUFON, we suggest that to all of our field investigators when they're brand new as required reading material, because it is that good. She's done a fantastic job of putting together, forensic field work in a book. It's really good.
She did. And she has distinguished herself so markedly since that book came out. She took off like a rocket in the very best sense.
Yeah.
She was a guest on this show maybe 6 weeks ago or so. I love Chase. She's an inspiration. She is as kind and thoughtful and as great a woman as she is a brilliant investigator and an asset to this field, and also another over-the-top role model for women looking to get more deeply involved in this work who might feel a little put off because at times it does seem like a boys' club.
Yeah, it can be like that a little bit, but it just depends on who you're working with and how you present yourself. You know, I mean, if you demand a little respect, you're probably going to get it, usually.
Another book or two that you'd recommend to, folks that are...
Leslie Kean, the book about pilots, generals,
government officials speak about UFOs.
That was, isn't it? I think it's just called UFOs, maybe.
Yeah, that's right. And
that's
then the long subtitle.
Yeah, that is a really good book. Richard Dolan has written some really good stuff. UFOs in the national security state, I think.
Yep.
That's really good. And he's got another one, UFOs for the 21st century, I think is the name of it.
21st Century Mind.
Yes, that's really good. There's just so many out there. For an all-around creepish great book, again, Hunt for the Skinwalker, I don't think you can beat that book. And again, that's by George Knapp and Colm Kelleher.
Yep.
And that tells the story about everything in the early days that's going on at Skinwalker Ranch. Yep. You can't get any of that stuff by watching the show on TV right now. You need to read this book and find out what's going on. I mean, that place ran the gamut of everything from bulletproof wolves to UFOs to Bigfoot type creatures to cattle mutilations, poltergeist activity, you name it. And I honestly, reading that book, I could only read it during the daytime. I couldn't read it at nighttime because it was just too creepy. There was just too many things going on in there. It was a little bit scary for me. And again, I've read all those Stephen King books and Dean Koontz. No problem. I could not read that book, The Hunt for the Skinwalker, at night. So just a word of caution, ladies, read it during the day.
In a way that's a compliment to the writers, and also we know the difference between fiction and nonfiction.
Yeah.
I should also say, for folks who are fans of Richard Dolan's work, and God knows there are an awful lot of us, Richard is actually one of my closest friends for 20 years now. We don't live that far from each other, so we've spent a lot of time together over the years here and abroad. Among his other works, of course, because Richard is a historian, is the first 2 volumes of this remarkably important series called UFOs in the National Security State, which Richard has projected to be a 3rd volume. And we were on the phone for quite a while last night, and he is working on it. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we will see that book, if not by the end of this year, then sometime next year. And that set will be done, and who knows what he'll move on to after that. Looking back on all your years in this work, are there any lessons or any thoughts that you'd like to share or impart with people who are ongoing students of this, no matter how advanced, or just beginning on the trail, just to, a watchword or a thought to keep in mind as they continue to educate themselves, either in the field, in the archives, or in the pages of a book?
Well, I would say it's okay to start out as an armchair researcher, reading. That's a great start, but you need to go on from there.
Yeah.
So after you read, then you go ahead and you open that can of worms and you stir that pot and you do your own research. You really need to do your own research. You don't take anyone's word on anything. You go to the internet, you go to the library, you find out what really is surrounding this whole story. You get the whole picture, and then you're going to be a semi-expert on that. But you just have to do your own research. It's just really important, and it's very, it just makes you feel good to know that you did that and you didn't take someone else's word on it.
Yeah. Very important. I think some people feel intimidated by that, but you have to remember that the greatest researchers, investigators, authors in the field were not that before they did it for the first time.
Right.
I occasionally find myself, when people ask me a similar question, that if you had unlimited funds, a laboratory, a full-time paid team of workers, your best research tools are still going to be your critical thinking, your
Mhm.
deductive reasoning, and your good old-fashioned common sense.
Right.
It's like this internal divining rod that, you can be wrong.
Hmm.
Uh, you can make bad judgment calls. There are people, thankfully very few in the field, who are intentionally trying to deceive. It's just a function of some people. But
Yeah.
overall, like in other areas, learn to trust your judgment, move forward, and maybe the next best thing important is develop relationships in the field.
Right.
And joining MUFON is a perfect way to start. But at the same time, I found that the best researchers, the best investigators, the best writers, almost as a matter of fact, also happen to be extremely decent people. And I think going back decades, when I was starting out in this field and, reached out to people like Stanton Friedman or Timothy Good in England. Um, and they just simply reconnected and encouraged me to do what I was doing, helped me along the way. I was particularly lucky in linking up with Bud Hopkins very early on. We both got involved in this subject at about the same time in the middle 70s, and 5 years, 6 years before he published his first book. He was my best mentor, certainly the most influential, and the best self trained investigator I ever met. I used to joke with him that if he'd gone into law enforcement instead of the arts or ufology, God help the criminal element in New York City. You can train yourself. You can be trained to do these things. And it's a grand adventure, whatever else you're doing in life. Keep your
Hmm.
day job, but don't feel awkward about striking out. And if you're in Arizona, here's the woman to contact.
Look us up. We'll help you out.
Any closing thoughts as we come into our last few minutes, my friend?
Just another thing that I wanted to add to people who are first starting out and stuff, you need to know what the stars are all about. So read a book on astronomy, know what you're seeing, know what you need to know what's anomalous out there. And the only way to know that is when you know what's regular out there. So take a course on astronomy. Even if you join MUFON, we have what's called MUFON University, and it's full of courses of everything. You can take an astronomy course on MUFON University for free. You need to know what's out there in the sky before you start trying to tell someone else what they saw. So astronomy is always very important. And also maybe a course in archaeology. You need to know some history. If you have never read anything about the Sumerian texts, you might want to look into that. That's our first written history there. So start there.
A great place to start and a great place to stop. Stacey Wright, thanks so much for spending this time with us.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
And you and I sit down and have a drink together in July in Denver.
We will.
This is Peter Robbins with my guest tonight, Stacey Wright. You've been listening to Meanwhile Here on Earth on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. If you've enjoyed the show, please tell your friends. See you next week. Stay well. Stand up for what you believe in. Fight for what you believe in. And be kind to each other. Take care.